The former Shadow Foreign Secretary, now Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Emily Thornberry, is here. Great to have you on the programme as always. What's your reaction for this joint call for an end to the war in Gaza?
Well, it was pretty powerful. The Foreign Secretary, in fact, said that there were more countries signing up. So he said that there were 31 countries now. I don't know if that's right. But whilst those countries are signing it, Israel, by almost return of post, puts up a post on social media just rejecting it, completely out of hand, and saying that it's divorced from reality. It's insulting. It's another example of Israel, this far-right government in Israel, just not listening to their friends and to their allies. And so we have to think about what it is that we can do to make sure they do listen. And I think the most obvious thing is listen, more than 80% of people in Israel, from what I understand, want there to be a ceasefire and want the hostages returned. So we're talking to this far-right government. We're not talking to the Israeli people. But this far-right government has to understand that they must stop. And so how do we make sure that they understand that it must stop? There's one chain of thought, which is that he's just stumbling to the end of term. On the 27th of July, the Israeli parliament breaks up, and so he can't be removed from power. So he could have a ceasefire in the meantime. There is an argument that the far-right people who are far-right people who are propping him up will take away his support if he has a ceasefire. So those who are trying to hold on to something say, well, maybe he'll have a ceasefire over the summer when they're not around to undermine him. But the other way, I think, is to say, well, the only person he does listen to, as far as we can tell, is Donald Trump. And so therefore, rather than trying to speak to the Israelis, we're now, I think, in a position where we have to be speaking directly to Donald Trump and say, you have the strength of 10 presidents. You can get the Israelis to listen to you in a way that no other American president has done. You must get them to stop.
So it's interesting. I just want to unpick a bit what you're saying here. So first, you think that effectively what Keir Starmer says, what David Lammy says, is kind of irrelevant as far as Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned?
As far as he's concerned, I think that not as far as the region is concerned. I think it's important that we're in the right place in the region and retaining our influence by being in the right place. And I think not as far as most Israeli people are concerned. I'm talking about these extremists who are running Israel at the moment. They don't listen.
So you think that the message now, the focus now, needs to be on sending a tougher message to Donald Trump? That's
getting Donald Trump to be the one who gives the message. Because, Donald Trump got them to turn their planes around in the air and, because they were on their way to another bombing raid in Iran. And Donald Trump's even stopped that. So he is somebody they listen to. And I don't know of anybody else that they do. So it seems to me just trying to be pragmatic here. And I appreciate that we have a fairly good relationship with Donald Trump compared to most countries. And I also appreciate that we don't want to use up all our political capital. But it does seem to me that this is one of the things that we should be using our political capital on. Do
you think that there is perhaps a kind of hesitation in Number 10 about upsetting Donald Trump, about irritating him? I don't mean to sound flippant there, because as you say, we have a certain amount of political capital to spend. There's an awful lot of things we want to get across the line with him. But you think that this should be the priority, right?
I think, well, I don't know. There are so many priorities. This must be a priority, but Ukraine must be a priority. We have used a certain amount of political capital and we've done it successfully and we've been a force for good when it comes to Ukraine. I think that we could with Israel, and I think that we have to. And what I really think is that we saw Macron coming to Britain, and when he addressed Parliament, the British Parliament, he said we should recognise. And I know that most people in the room agree with him. And I think that, and most of us in the room agreed that we should be doing it immediately, which is also what Macron said.
So you're talking here about recognising Palestine as a state?
Recognise Palestine as a state. And that's not going to stop the killing, not immediately. But what it should do is be like a starting gun for a renewed initiative.
Why do you think Keir Starmer hasn't done that?
I think because Keir Starmer has we all want the same thing. He just has a different idea of how to get there. And I think he's wrong about that. So I think for a long time he's thought that recognition should be part of a peace process. And my view is that there's going to be no Palestine left to recognise unless we recognise. And actually, it's time for desperate measures. And I think that what we should be doing is recognising, showing that we're players, showing that we're acting in good faith, working with the French. People may remember this famous treaty called Sykes-Picot from 100 years ago, when Britain and France carved up the Middle East. If Britain and France, it was pretty disgraceful, but anyway, we did it. Yeah. But Britain and France coming together now, and saying, we now, Palestine should be a state, and we together believe that, and we together want to work with the Arabs. We want to be able to work with Arab countries, with players in the region. We want to be able to put together a peace plan, and then we want to bring in Donald Trump and say, Donald Trump, you need to put pressure on the Israelis. They have to agree to this, because they have no serious plan. I mean, if they had something else, then that'd be a different matter.
I need to, as always at interviews, put alternative perspectives. Right?
No,
that's part of my job. And
Absolutely,
I think that there are some in Israel and within that government who think, look, this is existential.
Yes.
And that they have made progress through force in things like Iran, for example, against Hezbollah and against Hamas. Think entity countries or terrorist organisations that want them eliminated. What would you say to that?
I would say that I have absolute sympathy for Israel in their belief that they have Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, all of them saying that they want to eliminate Israel, and Iran as well. And I think that the only way in which Israel can be safe and secure in the region and not constantly at war is by agreeing to a solution that will allow for there to be some peace and tranquility in the region, which means giving the Palestinians what they need, which is a state of their own, and then for the countries of the region to have Israel's back, and for the rest of the world to have responsibility to ensure that we have Israel's back, and that at last Israel could have a peaceful place within the region, and actually the region could really take off if it wasn't constantly at war. And I just think that for the sake of Israeli children and Palestinian children, this is what we have to do. We have to find a peaceful solution. And as I say, I am open to suggestions from Israel, but they have no serious... I've spoken to many, Israeli politicians, and I have yet to hear anything serious from them. If they want to have one state, then actually I'm fine about that. But they won't have a largely Jewish democratic state if they have one state, because there's an awful lot of Palestinians there. So what do they want to do? I mean, if they want to do that, that's fine, but I don't think they do. But the Palestinians are not going anywhere. The Israelis are not going anywhere. So what's the solution? The solution is what we have said for 40, 50 years, 2 states. And I don't really understand, given that it's such a pillar of our foreign policy, why we can't then say we agree with 2 states and we recognise the second state.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much indeed. Always good to have you on the programme.
Nice to be here.